Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Heal and Restore podcast. I am Cathy Boyd, and today I'm giggling because I'm doing something completely different. Randy isn't going to join me today, not for this episode, anyways. And I don't have a guest, I don't have anybody joining me, so it's going to be just you and me. We're going to have an honest conversation, one woman to another. Or if there's any men listening, stay tuned because you may learn something in this podcast as well. So, today is going to be a subject that is very close to my heart. I know many women who experience this as well. And so I thought it was important for me to jump on here solo today and to just have a conversation. So here goes. So today we're going to talk about supporting his healing without losing yourself. Now, as I said that out loud, it could be the reverse, supporting her healing without losing yourself. So this could go either way. Of course, I'm talking from my perspective as a female about my husband and our journey. So if you're married to a man, I'll say it to a woman, who's healing from any type of childhood trauma, maybe it was addiction, grief, abandonment, emotional wounds, or just painful experiences from their past, you probably understand how complicated that journey can be. I know I can. You love him, you love her, you want to support him, you want to support her, and you want your marriage to be healthy, and you want to see him or her become the man or woman of God that they've been created to be. Somewhere along the way, you may have started carrying things that weren't meant to be carried by you. You never meant to carry them. Maybe you become responsible for managing their emotions. Perhaps you constantly monitor their mood and adjust your behavior based upon how they're feeling. Sometimes we talk about just blending in and taking their temperature to determine how we show up. Maybe it's just to protect them from anything that might upset them, disappoint them, or trigger them. I've been in that place before too. And, there's no doubt you might have become an encourager, a counselor, a protector, peacekeeper, a problem solver, and that emotional caretaker. Didn't mean to do it, but we did. And while we were concentrating on their healing, I may have slowly slipped and stopped paying attention to my own heart. So today I want to talk about how we can love and support our husbands or our spouse without losing ourselves in their healing journey. Honestly, this is not about abandoning the person you love. It's not about becoming cold. It's not about creating distant or becoming uncaring. It's really to learn about the differences between supporting someone and trying to save them. I was trying to save mine for a long time. It's also going to be about understanding where your responsibility ends and theirs begins, because they do have a responsibility to their own journey, just as much as we have a responsibility to our own journey. And it's about remembering that God cares about your heart, your needs, your healing, and your identity as well. So you ready to dive in? Here we go. So, when does their pain become part of your marriage? We have to remember that when we marry someone, we don't just marry the person standing in front of us. That would be too easy. We also enter into a relationship with the experiences that help shape that person, because we both bring a story into our marriage. We both have experiences that we bring into our marriage. We might bring in our childhood experiences, good, bad, or indifferent. There might be family patterns, there might be fears, expectations, both spoken and unspoken. Sometimes there's coping mechanisms, there's insecurities, there's wounds and beliefs about love and relationships. And some of those beliefs are things we might have read, but mostly it's usually the things that we've seen in our life growing up. And then some of those things, they're visible when we first get married, but a lot of them are not. Many are not, as a matter of fact. They don't show up till later. So sometimes that unresolved pain remains hidden for years. and it may not begin to surface until the marriage experiences stress, conflict, maybe some illness, financial difficulties. There's parenting challenges that go in with that. Or there could be other major life transitions that take place that those things will start popping. Many times a man or woman, they might have learned as a child that it wasn't safe to express their emotions. And then they become silent and withdraw when conflict arises. Maybe they have experienced rejection or abandonment, and they interpret the spouse's concern as evidence that she's preparing to leave. Yeah, that sometimes happens as well. And then many grew up in really chaotic homes where they try to control the surroundings because control means safety. It makes them feel very safe. And if someone has been constantly criticized, they get defensive when their spouse is really just trying to help them and to have a simple conversation, a simple, honest conversation. Anybody feel that? Anybody experience that? And if anyone has survived abuse, they will struggle. I say will. They may struggle, but they probably will struggle with shame, trust, intimacy, anger, or just emotional vulnerability. Sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable when you've been abused. And these reactions, they don't really begin with the spouse, but they will often affect the spouse. That's for sure. I relate to that. So this is one of the difficult realities that unresolved trauma, the original wound, it might have happened years ago, maybe when we were very young, into our teen and our young adult years, but it really can affect the marriage today, the relationship today, and that could be a relationship that's been going on for a couple years. It might be a relationship that's been going on for 10 or 15 years. But as a spouse, we have to be able to recognize that the pain underneath their behavior, we just have to be able to see it, understand it. And we may not know that, well, maybe we will know. We'll know that anger is really connected to fear, because fear is, anger is the basis, fear is the underlying. And it causes the withdrawal. And then it's connected to shame, or it's the need to control is connected to a childhood that felt completely out of control. So understanding this can really help us to be able to respond with compassion. However, understanding why someone behaves a certain way doesn't mean we have to accept the behavior. And that's something that took me a long time to understand. Because compassion and accountability, they can exist at the same time. We can have compassion and we can have accountability all at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can understand that the source of our spouse's pain and still be honest about how their behavior affects us. There's certain things we can say, and this took me a long time, and I'm still practicing doing this well, but we might say something like, I can understand that this conversation might be difficult for you, but shutting me out, that's only hurting our relationship. We might hear, I know anger was modeled for you growing up, but yelling at me is not acceptable. That's setting a boundary. Or we might say, I love you and I want to support your recovery, but I cannot do your recovery work for you. And that's when we step in and try to do it all for them because we want them to get well. And that's not going to benefit the relationship at all. We have to recognize the wounds. They don't require you to ignore the impact of the behavior. So recognizing the wound, it does not require you to recognize the impact of the behavior. So I want to talk a little bit about support and rescue, because support is not the same as rescue. Although support sometimes can turn into rescue if we're not careful. So there's a big difference between supporting someone and rescuing them. And I'm just going to give you a couple things to maybe you'll be able to connect with, because it was really helpful for me as well. So support says, I believe in you. But rescue says, I'm going to do it for you. I must do this for you. You're not capable, so let me do it. Support says, I'll walk beside you. And rescue says, I will carry you even when you're capable of walking. So we know they can do it, but we're still going to rescue and we're going to do it for them. That's not support. Support encourages responsibility, where rescue removes the responsibility. If we're rescuing, we're taking it all all accountability, responsibility away from them. Support allows someone to experience the natural consequences of their choices. But rescue constantly steps in to prevent discomfort, disappointment, and consequences. That happens with kids too. If we're not careful, we got to support them, but we've got to not rescue them from their consequences. Support is rooted in love. That is the deep part of support. We're saying, I love you so much. But rescue is often rooted in fear. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to walk in rooted fear. We may rescue because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. And that's true. I've been in that place too. I was always fearful of what the outcome would be. So I would just want to just do it, me do myself mentality. We might fear that our spouse will become angry, or they might withdraw. Maybe they'll relapse if they're in an addiction situation. That's a big fear for families who are in recovery from addiction, is that relapse word. Maybe we don't want them to shut down, or we don't want them to blame us. So we get to that rescue mindset. We might even believe that it's our responsibility just to keep them emotionally stable. That's a lot of work. And we might even tell ourselves, if I can just say the right thing the right way, they won't become upset. I don't know about you, but there were times when I would just have these little conversations in my head. Well, what if I say this? How will he respond here? That's exhausting. Or if I can just keep everything peaceful, it'll all be okay, because I've been in that place before too. And then the other one, I think that it's very easy. I know I can relate to this, is that if I just love him enough, he'll finally change. You can't love somebody into change. I'm telling you that right now. It takes it's just a tremendous and impossible burden that it places on us, the rescuer. And we can't keep doing that. And then we can't always say that everything's perfect enough to heal the other person's wounds. We can't say everything's perfect enough. No, it's because it's usually not in those situations. We're only fooling ourselves. We're in our own denial. And we cannot create a life that is free from every trigger. Triggers are going to be there. That's okay. But it's how we all respond to the triggers, both the person being triggered and the spouse or partner of the person being triggered. We can't love somebody and take responsibility if they're unwilling to do so. You cannot love someone into taking that responsibility, especially if they're unwilling to do so. It's not going to work. However, we can encourage him. We can pray for them. We can listen to them, listen to understand, and we can help create an emotionally safe relationship for them so that they will open up, they will become vulnerable. But you cannot do the healing work for them. There's just no way. That will spiral you for sure. Only they can choose to face the wounds, tell the truth about their behavior, seek help, and complete the action steps and practice a healthier way of responding. They can't do that alone. They're going to have to get some help for that. And that's what we do here at Heal and Restore Counseling. I'll just pull that plug right now. We'll talk about that towards the end of the podcast as well. But most importantly, only God can reach the places of their heart that we cannot reach. I know I played God for a long time thinking I was going to fix my husband and make him all better. But no, I didn't do a very good job of that. I only wore myself out doing that. You can love them deeply, but you can't be their savior. And I had to learn the hard way. It's not our responsibility. That's the job of Jesus, to be honest with you. That's his position. So you might wonder, I mean, for me, it was very, very subtle, but how do we begin losing ourselves? It's not like we wake up one morning and it's like, oh, I just lost myself. No, it happens. It happens over time. And most of us, we don't realize we're taking on other people's struggles. And then it usually happens to us gradually too. We start having our own struggles. We'll make one accommodation and then another, and then we'll excuse the behavior because we understand the pain behind it. That is something I can honestly say that I did for a long time. I would overlook the behavior because I knew of his struggle, but that wasn't benefiting him, nor was it benefiting myself. We stop bringing up certain subjects because we don't want to start an argument. And that is something that is very difficult to do. I still find myself sometimes not wanting to have a certain conversation And it doesn't necessarily have to be anything between us. It could be just sometimes general conversations because it could lead to an argument. So we have to work through that. We have to be able to be be able to have an argument, or not an argument. We have to be able to have a conversation about something that's on our heart without worrying about an argument. And a lot of times we set aside our own feelings because their feelings seem more urgent. Been there, done that. We might cancel something that's important to us because they're having a difficult day. And I'll be honest, that reminds me of a time where I used to want to do something for myself or with a friend, and I would look at the calendar to make sure he didn't have anything scheduled that day. So I felt like it was okay, almost giving myself permission that I could do something for myself that day. So that's definitely something I can relate to. And a lot of times we'll stop asking for what we need because we just don't want to have that added burden or that feeling that conflict might arise. So yeah, I can say I've been there, definitely. And then over time, like I said, it doesn't happen subtly. It's over time we become so focused on their emotional condition that we lose touch with our own. We forget that we have emotions. We might walk into a room and immediately ask ourselves, okay, what kind of a mood is he in? It's like taking their temperature. Is he okay? Did I do something? Do I need to do something? Should I bring this up now or will it upset him? What can I do to make things better? And I'll tell you, there were times when I used to stand on my head just to make him laugh. And that's pretty ridiculous. I'd put my head up against the wall and I'd throw my feet up and I would stand there just to try to make him feel better. That was funny at the time, but over time, looking back, that's not a healthy response. And before we know it, their mood determines the emotional atmosphere in the entire house. Whatever the environment is, it just kind of spirals from there. And then that leaves me, you, us, anxious. We might be exhausted, resentful, and we might get lonely or just feel invisible. We might go about our functioning and go to work, and we might care for our family. We might serve at church. We might even help other people and just get things that have to be done. It's like we get busy work, busy work, busy work. But from the outside, we look to appear strong. We look like we got it all going on. Our white picket fence is nice and shiny. But inside, we're tired, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And we may not even know what we need in that moment because we've spent so much time anticipating what everybody around us needs. And that's very common. We'll ask that question a lot of time is, what are your needs? And most of us don't know. When we're at a place of exhaustion, we just don't know what our needs are. And so that's where we often begin losing ourselves, but not through one dramatic decision or one of this or one of that. It's small things, and they're small acts of self-abandonment. And that sounds, self-abandonment. I abandoned myself for somebody else. It's not a safe, healthy place to be in. And one of the things we have to remember is that we're their spouse. We're not a therapist. We can't fix them. We're not specialized in this. So one of the biggest gifts that we can give our spouse is the freedom to be honest and vulnerable with us. And because we want our marriage, we want it to be a safe place. We want it to be where both of us can start sharing our struggles, maybe our fears and our emotions. But there's definitely a difference of being a supporting wife and becoming your husband's therapist. Now, for us, that's a little challenging. I have had to learn how to challenge my husband in a way as a coach, to kind of see things differently, to open his eyes. And so it's kind of a fine line for myself. But as a spouse, we can certainly listen, we can encourage, and we can pray, and we can offer perspective. And I think that's where I've come to, is I'm getting to a place where I'm not afraid to offer perspective because it is an opportunity for self-reflection. But a qualified professional can help process trauma for sure. That's something that we've experienced. We've had qualified professionals help us through trauma, and they understand those unhealthy patterns. They develop the coping skills, and then they'll address the concerns that require professional care. So if you are your spouse's only source of emotional support, it can really truly create an unhealthy balance in your relationship. Because now, in my mind, I'm like in fix-it mode. I'm gonna offer this emotional support, but I'm gonna lose myself in the process. So every conversation begins to revolve around the pain when we get to that place, and then our needs, they just get put on the back burner. They're constantly being postponed. Oh, I'll worry about that tomorrow. I'll worry about that the next day, and before you know it, we don't even remember what our needs are. So instead of experiencing the marriage as a husband and wife, we begin functioning as the counselor and client, or even possibly a parent and a child. And, that's hard to admit, but I think I was in a parent child relationship for not for many years, but in moments. I'll say there were moments of that parent child relationship. And that's not healthy for me, it's not healthy for you. So it's definitely something we need to open our hearts and do some self-reflection with. And then the other thing is that if your spouse needs people in their life who can support their healing without being personally affected by every decision he makes, we can't do it all. They need to have other people. And so depending on their needs, it might be a counselor, it might be a trauma-informed coach, maybe a pastor, recovery group. There can be a mentor, a doctor, a trusted friend. You don't want it to be just anybody. And I know we've talked about this many times, is that most people, I shouldn't say everybody, most people are well intended, but they also can cause harm if they're not familiar with what is needed and with the process and with the healing journey. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you're connected with somebody who understands what is needed. And that's what we do here at Heal and Restore Counseling. We have walked in many people's shoes. We have experienced a lot of these things, the trauma, the past childhood experiences, the addiction, the marriage struggles. And so that's why we do what we do, because our heart is, if we can overcome it, we can help others overcome it too if they're willing to put in the work. So just encourage them to seek appropriate help, because help is not rejection. Help is like saying, I love you enough to know that I can't do this myself, and that you can get the help that you need and that you desire, and that I want to say entitled to. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's help out there. That's what I'm saying. So they've got to be willing to do that. And it means you understand that the love alone is not always the resource that someone needs, because we can't love them into their healing journey. Definitely not. So, if someone has had a serious physical injury, you wouldn't expect the spouse to perform the surgery, right? I've been in a lot of hospitals with my husband, and I've seen a lot of open wounds, but I didn't know how to fix any of those. But we can offer the love and support while seeking the care of someone that's qualified to help treat that injury. And just remember that emotional wounds, they deserve that too. They deserve the appropriate care. So don't try to fix it yourself, men, women. So let's talk about supporting him without enabling him. Yeah. Supporting and enabling can sometimes look similar on the surface, but they have very different results. Remember that support helps a person grow, while enabling makes it easier for the person to avoid the growth. It takes longer. And I was an enabler. So if your spouse is healing from addiction, enabling them, I've been guilty of this. Enabling them means you might help cover up their behavior. Yeah. Might make excuses for them. Maybe give money to support the addiction, or just protect them from the consequences of the choices. I was always the one that drove everywhere when Randy was drinking. So not that I wanted him to get in an accident, hurt anybody, hurt himself, or have court-like obligations, but there was other things I protected him from. I always made excuses for his behavior, and covered up a lot of things. So, if they struggle with the anger, enabling them, it means excusing the repeated outbursts because of what happened to them as a child. It's like we give them permission. Enabling gives them permission to keep acting out like they did because of what happened to them as a child. And if they're avoiding difficult conversations, enabling them might mean never bringing up an important issue because you're afraid of how they'll respond. Yes, hello, been there, done that. And if they refuse to seek help, enabling them might mean taking on more and more responsibility so that they never have to. That's not a healthy place to go for sure. And one of the things I think that's really important is enabling is often motivated by love, but it can unintentionally help unhealthy behavior continue. That, we feel like we're helping them, because we love. The love is pushing the enabling, but it's just keeping them in that stuck behavior, and that's not a place that we want them to be. It's not a place that I want it to be either. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some healthy boundaries and what they might sound like. It took me a long time to understand this. The biggest thing about boundaries is we can set them, but we have to be able to follow through with them. So a couple of things that you might consider in a healthy boundary is, I will support your recovery, but I will not lie or make excuses for you any longer. It also can sound like I'm willing to talk about this when we can both communicate respectfully. And we see this quite often where heightened adrenaline takes over and both people go into it, but we have to be able to put on the brakes and say, I'm willing to talk about this when we can both communicate respectfully. Another boundary might look like, I care about what you're feeling, but I will not accept being yelled at or insulted. Just had that come up the other day with a client. So yeah, we have to be able to speak from a place of love, and we have to be able to speak our truth. Another boundary you might be able to say is, I believe coaching or counseling would help us, but I cannot force you to participate. And that is so true. It's one of the first things we ask our clients is, do you love each other? Even if it's just a little bit. And do you want this marriage to work? And we remind them that they have to be all in. You get out of it what you put in it. So you can't have one person participating and the other one not. That's a good boundary to set when you're going into a coaching client relationship. And another thing you might say is, I want our marriage to heal, but healing requires both of us to take responsibility. And yes, that is the key. Both parties have to participate. We at Heal and Restore Counseling, we actually give our clients action steps every week. And that is their responsibility. That is they're taking action not only to themselves, but to the marriage. And so it's really important that they take responsibility. And we have to remember one thing, boundaries aren't punishments, not at all. They are not threats designed to control the other person. I think at first it might feel that way. It's going to be uncomfortable, but a boundary is just a clear statement about what you will do to protect your emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being, as well as the relationship. And a boundary just doesn't say, you must change so that I can be okay. No, not at all. It says, I can control what you choose, or I cannot control what you choose, but I can decide how I will respond. So that's a healthy way to look at your boundaries. They're not set to just make things okay for yourself. They're set to enhance and to grow the relationship and to give you and empower us to be able to have a better response. As we kind of continue on here, there's a couple things that are going to come to my mind, and one of them is that our needs matter. We still have needs and they still matter. So as hard as it is when someone you love is struggling, it can feel selfish to set aside and talk about our own needs. Sometimes we might think that, they've been through so much, I shouldn't make this about me. But recognizing that your needs does not minimize their pain. Just because we have needs, it's not going to take away from their pain. Their pain's going to be their pain, but we also have those needs. And there is room in a healthy marriage for both stories. Again, we can hold both of those. We can hold their pain and our needs in the same palm of our hand. Their wounds matter, but then so do yours. His feelings matter, so do yours. Her feelings matter, so do yours. The healing matters. Their healing, your healing, both healing matters to you and to your partner. And I'll just remind you in Philippians 2:4, It says, let each of you look not only to your own interest or his own interest, but also the interest of others. And this scripture calls us to care about one another, but it does not tell us to erase ourselves. It says not to look only at your own interest. That means there's a healthy balance in which we can care about the other person while also taking responsibility for the life and heart God has entrusted us with. So even Jesus stepped away from the needs of other people to rest and to pray and to spend time with the Father. Jesus loved people completely, but he did not respond to every demand. He took care of himself. He didn't allow guilt. He didn't allow pressure or other people's expectations to determine his every decision and how he was going to show up. So remember, rest is not selfish. If Jesus took rest, so can you. So can I. And having needs is not selfish. Seeking support is not selfish. Wanting to be treated with kindness and respect, that's not selfish. And remember, your emotional well-being is not less important simply because your spouse has experienced any type of trauma, addiction, none of that. Your well-being is equally as important. And something that took me a while to get to was realizing that I needed support too. And that was really, it took me, you've heard us talk about it, when my husband started his recovery journey, I sat back and watched, but I realized I needed support too. So when your spouse begins a healing journey, much of the tension really does focus on them. And that's what it was. And that was okay. I was okay with that because I really didn't trust this process. I shouldn't say that I trusted it. I guess I just didn't know enough about the process. So early on, they might ask us, how are they doing? They may celebrate their progress, and they may encourage them with talking about how courageous they are, how vulnerable they are. And all of that it's appropriate and it's well deserved and it's necessary. It's an important part of their journey. But sometimes no one asks how we are doing, or how is she doing, or how is he doing. The opposite. No one asks what it's been like for him or her to navigate alongside their pain. No one asks how the past behavior affected trust, how it affected our confidence, our peace, or a sense of safety. And nobody ever asked whether she was exhausted. If this describes you, let me just share this with you. Please hear me. You're allowed to need support too. And you may benefit by having your own coach, your own counselor, a pastor, a mentor, a trusted friend, or support group. And that's what I did. I finally, after a while, realized that I needed help too. And that's when I started my CODA journey, Codependence Anonymous. I'm not anonymous because I know that the program helped me and I know it can help others as well. So I don't hide behind the anonymous. That's my choice. A lot of people do, and I respect that as well. But my support group started out, I had my therapist, but I also had my CODA group as well. And that kind of was my lifesaver that got me started on my own journey as well. And then I was able to journey alongside my husband. So when you're seeking out, it should be someone whom you can be honest with without being judged, pressured, or told simply to try harder. I'm sorry, trying harder is exhausting. You're not going to try harder. You've got to get some support. You need a safe place where you can talk about your feelings openly without worrying that your honesty is going to interfere with your spouse's healing. Because you may feel love and anger at the same time. Again, we can hold both places, and that's okay. You might feel compassion and you might feel resentment. Yeah, I definitely felt compassion, but I also felt resentment. We might be grateful for their progress, but we can still grieve the areas that we have struggled with and that have cost us. And it's finding the balance. You can hold both spaces equally. You might be hopeful about your future, but still feel tired from the past. Yeah. Those are all mixed emotions. They don't make you a bad spouse. They don't make you a bad person. They make you human. Actually, they make you human. Those are real things that really are going to happen. And it's okay. Because healing rarely happens in a perfectly straight line. Our spouse might have setbacks, difficult days, and moments when some of the old behaviors and the old patterns return. That might happen to us as well. We might have bad days. But you're going to want people around you that help you to remain grounded, help you to remain focused, and don't require you to emotionally carry the up and down of every stage of journey. So find yourself someone that you can trust, that's going to hold you accountable, not just pat you on the back, hold you accountable and be able to walk with you on that journey. And I have several women in my life that I can honestly say hold me accountable, and I can also hold them accountable as well. One of the things, I'm giggling here as I dive into this next little area, well, give yourself permission to tell the truth. And I probably did the opposite of that in a lot of cases, but I also held back the truth in a lot of cases. I probably spoke the truth more often than not, but I also held back on certain things. So, supporting your spouse, it doesn't require you to pretend that everything is okay when it isn't. And I've talked about my white picket fence. Everything looked good on the outside, but nobody knew what was going on the inside. And then when my husband had an affair, I told everybody. So I've been in both places. One of the things we have to remember is we can be grateful for the progress, but it's okay to still talk about the pain that's still there. Because that pain doesn't go away immediately. And I have found that talking about pain, talking about my truth, takes the power out of what's going on in my head. All those thoughts, the things that I continually cycle around. So being open and honest takes the power out of that for sure. We can celebrate. We can celebrate their willingness to change, while also realizing and acknowledging that the effect of their past choices had on us. We want to celebrate them, but we don't want to negate and forget about what those choices had on us, how they affected us. And the other thing that's important too is we can forgive while recognizing that trust has to be rebuilt. Forgiveness does not give you a straight line of trust. Forgiveness takes time, trust takes time, but both can happen. Both can happen. I am one that has been I'm grateful that God gave me the ability to forgive, but it didn't make me forget. And I don't ever want to forget, because that is where my power, my empowerment comes from, is realizing that I can overcome hard things, and you can too. So forgiveness, it can be offered through grace, but trust grows through the consistent behavior over time. And that was the key. Somebody asked us recently, how was it, or why was I able to forgive so easily? Maybe that was the question. I don't really remember, but I looked at my husband and I said, actually, it was him. It was his actions. And that's what it was over time, watching him do the things that forgiveness and trust. I think it was trust. That's what the question was, is how were you able to trust again? And I said, I didn't do the trust. He did the trust. His actions showed what trust was and how my trust was developed, because he did all the things that he said he was going to do. If he said he was going to be home at a certain time, he was home at a certain time. If he was running late, he would let me know. So trust does grow through consistent behavior over time. And so it was his actions that created the trust. I didn't have to create the trust. He had to create the trust. So they're not the same thing. Forgiveness is offered through grace, like I said, and it grows over time, but it's consistent time, not just trust me today, make a mistake. I mean, we're going to fall. We're going to have inconsistencies, but it's about getting back up and doing what's right over and over and over again. And sometimes as women, we feel pressure that we have to move quickly once our husband begins taking responsibility. But that's not true. You might hear things like, he apologized. Why are you still upset? Or he's getting help now. Isn't that enough? The famous one is, you need to forgive and let go, or forgive and forget. No. Your healing has its own timeline. It doesn't happen overnight. It won't happen overnight. If trust was damaged over months or even years, it's not going to be restored after one conversation or one apology or a few good weeks. You're not punishing him for needing time. It's okay to need that time. And you're not refusing to forgive because you still have questions. It takes time. It's not a one and done. If it was one and done, it would be way too easy. We'd all be living these happy lives, but that's not reality, people. You're not failing spiritually because your heart needs consistent evidence that change is taking place. No, not at all. An apology can open the door to healing, but it's that consistent action. It's what helps to rebuild the safety. Tell the truth about where you are. When you do, it's not to shame them. It's not to keep them trapped in the past or her in her past. Because true, real intimacy cannot grow where honesty is absent. It just can't. Intimacy is all about honesty. So you have to be honest to create that intimacy. Ugh, can't spit that out today. And as we go into this, one of the things I want to remind you is let him own his journey. Let her own her journey. Because one of the hardest things that we may have to do is allow the men or women in our life that we love dearly to own their own choices and their own healing. We want to remind them about appointments. We want to make sure they complete their assignments, or we want to suggest that they should discuss what they should discuss in counseling. We want to evaluate whether they're making enough progress. We may even find ourselves working harder on their healing than they are. But if you're doing all the work, whose journey is it? It's no longer their journey. There's nothing wrong. I'm here to tell you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with offering encouragement or practical help when they ask for it. But there's a difference between helping and taking over. And I have been in a place where, as a good codependent that I am and that I work on daily, I want everybody to get through it. I want them to get over it. I want them to, So I have had a tendency to just do things without asking. But asking is key. So what are some things you can ask? You might ask yourself. These are really good questions to ask, and I think it helps create intimacy in the relationship. It creates openness in the relationship. There's transparency in the relationship. So some of the things you might ask is, how can I support you this week? That's very inviting. You might ask, would you like me to listen, or are you looking for feedback? I know for a long time, I was constantly giving feedback and they didn't ask. You might even say, is there something specific you need from me? And then give them time to answer. You don't have to anticipate their every need. You don't have to solve their every problem. You don't even have to remind them of everything that he already knows. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is just sit back and allow the other person to take responsibility. It's not easy, but it is very important that we do that. And it might feel uncomfortable. I know I've been in that place before, and especially if you were like me, where you spent all the years holding everything together, keeping all the balls in the air, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to sit with your hands under your butt and do nothing about it. But remember, their growth requires their participation. It's not all up to you. And remember, they need the dignity of discovering, with God's help and appropriate support, that they're capable of doing hard things. If we make it easy for them all the time, they'll never get to a place of realizing how empowering doing hard things can be for themselves. The other thing that's important, I think, here is we do not allow their healing to become our identity. Ugh, that's hard. It's easy to become so invested in someone else's healing that their progress becomes the center of our life. When he has a good day, we have a good day. When she has a good day, I have a good day. When they struggle, we all fall apart. When he makes progress, we all feel hopeful. Or when they return to their old behavior, it feels like everything's been lost. You want to just give up. But your identity cannot be built around how well another person is doing. No, you're not just the wife, or you're not just the husband. You're not merely the supporter of someone else's story. You're a child of God. You have your own gifts, you have your own calling, you have your own relationships, dreams, and you have your own area of growth. Remember, God's doing something in you too. So ask yourself, what parts of my life have I neglected? What did I once enjoy that I no longer have time for, or that I no longer make time for? Not that you don't have time, you don't even make the time for it. And then which friendships have I allowed to fade away? Another question you may ask yourself is, what is God inviting me to learn in this season? There is always something to learn in the season. What do I need emotionally, spiritually, physically? Who am I becoming? And these questions aren't to distract you from your relationships or your marriage. A healthy relationship and marriage is made up of two people who each want to grow, they want to heal, and they want to take responsibility for their own lives. So you don't strengthen your marriage by disappearing inside it. Yeah, you don't. That's not going to strengthen your marriage by just disappearing inside of it, not at all. And one thing I think that's important, and I wish I had this, I wish I had this knowledge when we went through our stuff. I think I had it, but I didn't know how to apply it. Let's put it that way. It was there, but it was very low on the totem pole. And that's to stay connected to God, not just to the crisis. For me, the crisis was what I stayed connected to. So if someone we love is struggling, our prayer life can become centered entirely around the crisis. And whether you believe or not, these are just things I think we can all say that there's something greater than ourselves that can help us through this. So prayer life can be very important. God, please change him. God, please help him. God, please fix this. These prayers are understandable, but God is also inviting us into a relationship that is deeper than our circumstances. It's not just the crisis. He's inviting us into something deeper than our circumstances. What he wants from you is he wants to be able to speak to your heart. He wants to remind you of who you are. And he wants to give you wisdom, not just relief. And I think we look for the surfacey things first, but we need to look into the deeper things too. And he wants to show you when to speak, when to remain silent, when to help, and when to step back. James 1:5 says that if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. There's going to be moments when you need wisdom more than you need an immediate answer. And so we have to be able to pause, and we have to be able to just say, God, show me what belongs to me and what does not. Help me love without controlling. Help me support without rescuing. Give me courage to speak the truth without grace, or with grace. I want grace. Yes, grace, please. Show me where I need stronger boundaries. Remind me that I'm not responsible for the other person's choices. God, protect my heart from bitterness, from fear and resentment. Help me trust you with the parts of this journey, of their journey, that I cannot control. Remember, when we remain connected to God, we remember that we're not carrying the relationship all alone. He's right there in the middle of it, but we've got to put him in the middle of it. We can't ignore that. So you've heard us talk about getting healthy support and what it can look like. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, specifically on this particular topic. And so what does it really look like? You might ask yourself. Healthy support, it can be listening without immediately trying to fix the problem, right? That's hard to do sometimes, but we really can support somebody by just being an ear, just listening without having to fix it. It might mean recognizing that their progress and acknowledging the courage it took to face those painful memories. Let them know that. It might mean asking what kind of support would be helpful instead of assuming that we already know. A lot of times we think we have all the answers, but they may not be the right answers for that circumstance or that situation. We may have good answers, but just not for that situation. And it might mean just praying for them while encouraging them to use the professional and community support that's available to them. We have to be able to create space for honest conversations while refusing disrespectful behavior. And it can mean showing compassion without excusing the harmful choices. Remember, we can't make excuses for them anymore. That's healthy. And it might even mean that celebrating growth without making yourself responsible for maintaining it. They might do something great. Let's celebrate that. But it's not your responsibility to keep that celebration going. It's their responsibility. And it might even mean saying, I love you and I believe in you. But this is something you must choose for yourself. And that is one of the keys in recovery, is anybody that is walking in any type of addiction, they've got to be able to do it for themselves. If they're doing it for their spouse, their kids, their family, their work, whatever, they're making the wrong choice. They've got to choose themselves. They've got to make themselves that priority. Healthy support, it just leaves room for both to have a voice. And I love that. And I feel like we're finally in a place where we do have healthy support for each other. Does it always come out in a healthy way? No. We're going to be working on this the rest of our life, and I think you will too. But I love the fact that we are both in a healthier place, that we can support each other through this process. One thing we have to remember, it does not require one person to become smaller so that the other person can heal, because you're both in a healing journey at that point. So I want to give you a little gentle check-in. I want to invite you to pause and honestly consider a few questions that I have for you. And you don't have to answer them out loud, but you may want to write them down in a journal or spend some time praying about them. And so I'm going to read you some questions here that I've created that gives you a gentle check-in. And if you are listening to this, you might have to pause to write these down. You might have to come back and replay it so that you have your journal and paper and pen ready. But these are going to be some important check-ins, evaluations. So, ready? Here we go. First question is, have I become more responsible for their healing than they are? Have I become more responsible for their healing than they are? Number 2, do I feel guilty when I take time for myself? Tough one. Do I feel guilty when I take time for myself? Number 3, am I afraid to express my feelings because of how they may respond? Some self-reflection here. Am I afraid to express my feelings because of how they may respond? Number 4, have I confused keeping the peace with creating true emotional safety? Think about that. Have I confused keeping the peace with creating true emotional safety? Number 5, am I making excuses for behavior that continue to hurt me? Am I making excuses for behavior that continues to hurt me? Number 6, have I neglected friendships, interest, rest, or spiritual practices that once brought me life? That's a heavy one. Have I neglected friendships, interest, rest, or spiritual practices that once brought me life? Number 7, do I believe their emotional stability is my responsibility? Hopefully after listening to this podcast you can answer that, but you have to think back. This is a reflective question back on past. Do I believe their emotional stability is my responsibility? And number 8, am I receiving support from my own heart? Am I receiving support from my own heart? It's okay. You need to if you're not. And then number 9, what boundary do I know I need to establish? I think we always know. It's just a matter of doing. So what boundary do I need to establish? And the final question I have is, what burden am I carrying that belongs to God or to my spouse? What burden am I carrying that belongs to God or to my spouse? I just want to remind you that these questions, they're not meant to condemn you. It's really an invitation to honesty and transparency and vulnerability with self. Sometimes we don't realize how exhausted we have become until we finally stop long enough to listen to our own hearts. Yeah, but we've got to take the time to listen to our own hearts, that's for sure. So one of the questions that we get quite often is, what if they resist the boundaries? What if they resist the boundaries? We have to remember that when we begin changing an unhealthy pattern, the other person, they're not going to fully understand. They're not going to be immediately welcome to the change. Oh, this sounds good. I love this. Let's do this again. No, if your spouse is accustomed to you navigating and managing everything, it's going to feel uncomfortable when you step back. If they're accustomed to you avoiding conflict, they might become defensive when you begin speaking honestly. They might where's my wife and who took her type thing, or where's my husband and who took him, if they're accustomed to you absorbing the consequences of their choices, they're going to accuse you of being unsupportive when you stop doing it. Yeah, change is hard. It requires standing your ground. Remember, discomfort doesn't automatically mean that the boundary is wrong. It's just uncomfortable. But we have to remember, boundaries should be communicated clearly and respectfully. They shouldn't be used to manipulate, threaten, or punish. So how do we communicate those boundaries clearly and respectfully? You might say, I love you. and I want to continue supporting your healing. But I also recognize that I have been taking responsibility for things that belong to you. I need to make some changes so that both of us can become healthier. How many times do we hear I? I love you. I want to continue supporting your healing. But I also recognize that I have been taking responsibility for things that belong to you. I need to make some changes so that both of us can become healthier. And they might need time to understand, and that's okay. And you might need help yourself from a counselor, a coach, to establish and maintain those healthy boundaries, because there's accountability required of yourself when we're establishing those boundaries. It's just not establishing them, but actually being accountable to hold them up, you know. And if there's abuse, intimidation, if there's threats, violence, or fear of your physical safety, this is no longer simply a communication or boundary issue. Please reach out to a qualified professional or a domestic violence resource and to develop a safety plan, because supporting someone's healing never requires you to feel in danger or to remain in danger. That is a public service announcement. If you feel like you are in danger because of physical threats, emotional threats, abuse of any kind, please reach out. Contact us. We'll help you get the resources at Heal and Restore Counseling for sure. So remember, you can love them, you can love her, you can love him, but you can still choose yourself at the same time. It's okay. And that phrase, choosing yourself, it definitely can sound selfish. But I don't mean choosing yourself at the expense of your marriage. No, not at all. What I'm saying is that refusing to abandon the person God created you to be. Don't refuse who God created you to be. You can love your spouse, but you can still rest. You can support them, and you can still have boundaries. You can show compassion, and you can still tell the truth. Remember, you can forgive and still require trust to be rebuilt. And it's important to know that you can remain committed to your marriage, but still seek help for yourself. You can pray for him without trying to control the outcome. You can walk alongside him without carrying him. You can care about his healing, her healing, without allowing it to consume your entire identity. Their healing journey belongs to them. Your healing journey belongs to you. Your marriage journey belongs to both of you. And all three must be honored. So as I close out this episode, if you feel like you've been carrying your spouse's pain, the choices, the emotions, the healing process maybe, I want you to hear this right now, right here, today. You're not failing them by putting down what was never yours to carry. You're not abandoning them by allowing them to take responsibility. You're not selfish for acknowledging what your needs are as well. You're not unloving for establishing boundaries. Hard, but you're not unloving. And you're not a bad spouse because you cannot heal every wound placed in the person you love. Remember, your role is not to save them. Your role is to love them with honesty, wisdom, with compassion, and grace while remaining faithful to the person God has created you to be. You are allowed to be a whole person within your marriage. And you are allowed to have a voice. And you are allowed to have and need support. And guess what? You're allowed to heal too. So I hope that you found this encouraging. I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that you have gained some wisdom through this conversation today. Felt kind of strange just talking to myself here, but I just want to thank you for taking some time to listen to me only today. And I will remind you that if this episode spoke to your heart, I'm going to encourage you to share it with another man, another woman who may be needing support because they might be losing themselves, or they're, losing themselves slowly in the process. And also a reminder, I love this, that we get to do this every week, is want to remind you that if you, your spouse, or somebody you know is struggling and needing help navigating trauma, maybe recovery, communication, boundaries, or just rebuilding an emotional connection, Randy and I offer, and we will offer it forever, a 1 hour complimentary, no cost to you discovery session. And what this does is it gives us an opportunity to hear your story, learn what you're facing, and learn what your goals are so that we can determine whether we at Heal and Restore Counseling may be a good fit for you. We know that when we start this journey of recovery, um, I say recovery, and I just am reminded it's not just drugs and alcohol. What were we recovering? We're recovering the things that have been lost in our life. Maybe it's a struggle in our marriage. Maybe it's an individual struggle. It could be addiction. I'm not going to throw that out the door, but we want you to we want you to recover to become all that God has created you to be. And so that's why we do what we do. But we want to make sure we're a right fit, because as you walk down a journey of healing, you want to be able to walk along somebody that has been there, that has had that experience, that is going to encourage you, bring you wisdom, and just walk out life with you. And what better way to do that than through Heal and Restore Counseling? So to learn more or to contact us and schedule your 1 hour no cost discovery session, you can contact us through our website at www.healandrestorecounseling.com. There's also some great testimonies of some past clients we've helped. There's a lot of information about who we are, what we do, why we do it. But remember, you can support your healing without abandonment. You can support their healing. You can support your own healing, but more importantly, you can support their healing without abandoning your own. And we can walk beside you. We can carry what belongs. Well, we're not going to carry what belongs to you. We're going to help you carry what belongs to you, and we're going to help you let go of what doesn't belong to you. And you can love your marriage while still honoring the woman or the man that God's created you to be. But sometimes we just need a little help from our friends. So until next time, may God continue to heal your heart, restore your relationships, and guide you forward in greater freedom, peace, and connection. And remember this, if nobody tells you today, God loves you, I love you, Randy loves you. And I said God loves you first, but more importantly, God loves you the most. So be blessed, everybody. Have a great week.